in the George Houston Bass Performing Arts Space. George Houston Bass started Rites and Reason in 1970, which makes Rites and Reason the oldest continuously running black theater in New England. So we're very proud of that. And we're very proud to welcome you to Chicago House Weekend that was initiated and organized by my friend and colleague, and he was never my student, Micah Salkind. I want to just do a little housekeeping, about the phones and stuff, but in case we have to exit because it just gets too wild in here, there's exits here and really exits in the corner, in each corner, if we have to evacuate quickly. But that's really not going to happen. So I'd like to welcome Micah to our stage. Welcome you, sisters. Thank you very much for coming, and Micah will introduce everybody.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you to Rites and Reason, Africana Studies, for your ongoing support of artists and innovative research. Big thank yous to production manager Kathy Moyer, tech director and lighting designer Alonzo Jones, administrative coordinator Neri Garcia, and my brilliant artistic collaborators for the upcoming workshops, visuals designer Jasmine Lee Johnson, whose work you can see a little bit of back here, set designer Montana Blanco, and sound designer and DJ Jackson Morley. So I'm also going to thank our sponsors right now, the Creative Arts Council, without whom this would not be possible, the Center for Race and Ethnicity in America, the John Nicholas Brown Center for Public Humanities, the Department of Theater Arts and Performance Studies, and the Pembroke Center for Teaching and Research on Women, as well as my home department, American Studies, in particular Jeff Cabral and Pat Balsafiore, who have helped me manage funding and vendors. So our featured artist scholar in residence this weekend is Boogie McClarin. Boogie is a Chicago-based teaching artist, dancer, and choreographer, committed to helping individuals explore personal struggle, power, and liberation, using a vocabulary steeped in diasporic exploration, sustained improvisation, and folk forms. Boogie creates groundbreaking works, exploding the myths and matrices of oppression with sound and movement. Tonight, joining us from the ladies of MAWU, we have Linda Lanija, Ephrat Asherie, Rhodesia Rhobledo, and Tara Critchlow. Welcome. MAWU is an all-female company that embodies strong, positive images of women in the urban dance community and creates fierce, innovative works that both educate and inspire new audiences. And moderating and moving us in conversation today is street dancer, educator, activist, and founding artistic director of Dream Dance Company, Naomi Bragin. Naomi works at the intersection of dance, critical black theory, gender and sexuality studies, and ethnography, and is a PhD candidate in performance studies at UC Berkeley. So when I came to Karen after returning from Chicago this fall and began talking about the impact that Boogie's teaching had on me and my research, she suggested that we try to bring her here to Brown to teach from the dance floor, but also stressed that we would benefit hugely from creating an informal conversational setting where Boogie could discuss her work with others in her field. And Boogie suggested Ladies of MAWU as a group of peers and dancers from New York who would be able to give some great perspective on the work that's happening both nationally and internationally in house dance circles. So those of us affiliated with Africana Studies and Rites and Reason Theater work to expand the public's notion of who does research and what research looks and feels like. So we're thrilled that you're here to be a part of this research. And without further ado, I'm going to leave it to Naomi to take us into conversation.
Well, thanks everyone for being here and joining us today. And thank you everyone for being here. It's really wonderful to see your faces. I wanted to open first to just acknowledge our sister in the struggle, Marjorie. Marjorie is her contributions to Marjorie Smart, her contributions to house dance and really to street dance on a global level are really important to pay tribute to. And she's been struggling for a while, with health issues. And so she's not joining us today, but I know that she's really here in spirit. And, I've been really thinking a lot about Marjorie for the last couple of weeks, especially. And so I just would like to take a moment to invoke her spirit, you know. Yeah, and just to hold her here in our conversation, in our hearts. So, my first question, I have really just a couple of easy questions, and I mean, they're pretty straightforward, and hopefully they'll spark conversation and we can just roll from there. The first, really basic, is just to ask a little bit more about your connection to house dance. And so really to know, you know, how do you connect to house dance, and how has that experience been either local and or transnational?
Should I start?
And yeah, any order.
Well, I'm born and raised in New York City, so like house was kind of around me. You know, when my mom would bring me like to Washington Square Park when I was a kid, or like I remember kids in school would have like tapes and like they would play like songs and they'd teach me like a couple of dances in the clubs, but I was still too little to like sneak to the clubs until like, you know, like maybe I was 16 then I started sneaking to clubs. But yeah, like so I knew, okay, so there was like the club aspect where I could go to the parties and jump around and like see all different kinds of people. Like I specifically really remember Shelter the most, and it was like a big place, and I just remember you could go to different areas and see different kinds of people doing different kinds of dances or different kinds of outfits. Like it was just such a mix, and it was very like free, and like I liked also like the hours. Like it started at 11 p.m. but then it finished at like noon, so it's the only party like that I would go to where you could leave and it would be daytime. You'd be like, oh wow, let's go to the diner and have pancakes, like, so like I remember that. But then I also remember like when it was time to like try to learn how to do steps that you saw people doing, and like for example, like I always tell people about Terry. There's a dancer, his name is Brooklyn Terry, and I used to go to Shelter with him sometimes, and I'd be like, show me how to do that step, and he'd be like, it's like this, and I'm like, that didn't help. Thanks a lot. And it's dark in here, and but I did this film called The 25th Hour. It's a Spike Lee film, and I was on the set with like dancers all day, so it was like Voodoo Ray, Marjorie, Cynthia, Sekou, Which Way Sha. And since we were hanging out all day and like I was like, younger than them, like that was like the first time I really remember people actually like teaching me like specific steps. So overall though, these experiences of, like for me has one helped me to really develop a feeling of community and just learn to be myself, just because being in an environment where one like I'm telling you, Shelter, like you saw so many things, it just made you feel like, well, if that's working, then, well, anything can work, like, and everything is fine and it's all good. So, yeah, that's like a piece that you feel, because sometimes in society and in daily life, you feel like you don't fit in. So being in a place where everyone is just who they are, it's very like relieving and therapeutic, where everyone's just doing what they do. And being able to learn steps from like people who are, a generation before me also helped me to feel like now I have big brothers and big sisters who look out for me, and who, like even like, talking about Marjorie, like, that's someone, along with a few like other people who like I really see them as like, yeah, the people who like kind of passed baton to me, like, like something that's sacred to them, like they, passed it to me. So that also is very empowering and, I don't know, special.
For me, my connection to house dance, first and foremost, started with the music. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as house dance, actually. I remember my first experience hearing what we would Grace. Grace. The first time that I saw Grace was through the album Haley Dancers. And I just remember hearing the soundtrack and just being overwhelmed. You know, I was sitting in my seat like, oh my gosh, like what is this? And why am I the only one dancing right now? And I just remember thinking to myself, you know, I just want to know more about what it is I'm hearing, you know, what it is that inspired me to move in that way. And the soundtrack was Roy Davis Jr., Paul Johnson, a lot of producers that I eventually looked up and, you know, discovered more of their discography and the body of their work. And it took me to, you know, Chicago house music. And by way of, you know, listening to a lot of old school house DJs and producers, I just discovered that there was a whole genre of music that I'd never discovered before, and it just took me on a journey. That journey took me to New York. I was going to school in Jersey at the time, so I was in pretty close proximity to New York, and I ended up just, you know, trying to discover the New York nightlife, and I discovered Shelter, Loft Party with David Mancuso, Underground Network, Underground Collective parties, and that's when I realized that there was something bigger than just the music. And the more I listened, the more I went out, the more I realized that this was something, you know, very meaningful and very powerful. For me personally, it was how I discovered my voice. You know, house music just gave me context for self-expression. You know, I identified with the music, I identified with the rhythms, and all of that is, you know, what gets expressed, you know, through my movement. And in being around house dancers and, you know, some of the OGs that were going out in New York City, members of Dance Fusion, members of Elite Force, through them I really discovered that there was a long history of developing, you know, an art form. And so in terms of, you know, on a, you know, how I connect, you know, locally and internationally, I mean, I would say that there's definitely two realms that exist within house for me. You know, one that's very, very personal, and one that is shared. And so there's a very special connection that I have with just being able to go out to a club and not talk to anyone, but, you know, really have, you know, one of the most deepest exchanges with another person. And then there's another realm which involves traveling, teaching workshops overseas, you know, attending major competitions, judging competitions, and being in a different context and trying to communicate that feeling, you know, and that, you know, that cultural context to dancers who don't necessarily have the same experience that I've had, and trying to get that message across. So it's definitely a challenge that I navigate. I know the rest of the members of MAWU navigate on a regular basis.
My journey has been,
Excuse me, may I ask that each of you speak up, please? We're recording this with available sound,
okay,
sure, and we want to hear every word.
okay. My journey, well, I'm from Connecticut, first and foremost. So I was one of these people that came in driving, jumping on trains, jumping on buses. And I actually grew up knowing about house, but like not the depth of it. Like I I've always been a music lover. I've always sought new music, even in middle school, even as early as middle school. And coming up in a time when hip hop was new and exciting and fun, and it was cool to know all these new artists, new groups. And during that time, house music was more mainstream. You heard artists like CeCe Peniston, and that song "The Power" was out, and that was my first exposures to Jungle Brothers, like Girl House Shoes. That was my first exposure to house music in any way, shape, or form. And to me, that's all I knew. And when I went into high school, a lot of the kids that, well, not a lot, there was a small group of kids that were really eclectic, and they were going into the city a lot. They would come back with mixtapes, and they were sharing them, and this is how I started to find out the depth of this music on different levels. And then it just became like fascination, you know. It was like I had to have it. It was a drug, you know. And I can just touch on what she was saying about it being, you know, something that's personal and shared. And for me, just like loving the music initially and growing and allowing that love of the music and my appetite for more music to like just grow and grow and grow. It wasn't about the dance. It wasn't about the community. For me, it started with the music. So my love for this music led me to the community, you know. I basically just followed the breadcrumbs, you know, and just, you know, eventually I went to school in college in New Haven, Connecticut. And from that point on, when back in '96, I started clubbing. And my first club was Club Shelter. And again, not necessarily wanting to be the best dancer. Before I went to this club for the first time, we would do a lot of local parties in Connecticut and just kind of like get together with friends and dance, but it wasn't anything like community based or understanding what this community is or understanding what the depth of what this community is all about. It was just us just playing the music we loved as a group. It was very simple, you know, and very pure. So once I started going out, it completely changed my life. From that day, my life has been changed. So I thank God for that, and I'm really happy that, you know, I was put on that path, and I actually put myself on that path. I really never took classes. I'm purely taught I'm club taught. My style is like straight club style. And there's a lot of different realms out there, like Linda touched on. You know, there's a lot of other things I can say, but I feel like both of them have said it already, so I'm trying not to repeat the same things they said. So with that being said, you know, there's she was saying the battle realm and the club realm, and then, you know, this is what our community has elevated to over the years. And, you know, but this is when I first started going out, and when my first involvement within this community, this is all that existed. I mean, this is before the name house dance existed. This is before names and steps existed. All there was the dance, and you just went out to the club, and you wanted to hear the DJs. You went out because the DJ drew us there. Like, I wanted to hear this specific DJ. I wanted to hear their sets. I wanted to hear good music. And that was the point of going to these clubs, was because this is the only place you can hear this music. So it was special. You couldn't hear this anywhere else. So over time, it just grew. These people, you have individual experiences with each one of them, the shared energy. And over time, your dance just develops naturally, very organically. It's a shared, like, personal thing with each person. And with each person, you develop. Every time you go, every time you exchange, every time you share. And for me, that was, in a nutshell, that was like, it's been my journey, and it's just grown from there. Now I'm in MAWU, I'm a part of a few other organizations, you know, performances and just little things here and there, but, you know, my heart and where I have always been rooted in is the club and that community. So.
grew up in the 90s, and then I started breaking. And I didn't know anything about house. Like, I had heard, you know, like a lot of hip house records on the radio. You know, MC Light, Queen Latifah. But yeah, I didn't really know about house as a scene or as a culture until my friend, who, she actually took me to my first breaking practice in Brooklyn, in Bushwick. She was like, oh, come to Shelter with me. And I was like, what? We're going to go to like a shelter? And she was like, no, it's a club. I was like, wow, I'm really clueless. And she was like, oh yeah, no. She had lived in Chicago. She was from Florida, but had lived in Chicago. And she was like, oh no, you got to get into the house thing. And I was like, I have no idea what it is. And she took me to Shelter. And I had no idea what hit me. I just walked in there and I was like, similar to what Tara said, you just walk in and you're like, wait, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm gonna come back. I know that in 1 minute, and yeah, I'm just gonna watch. I don't even remember for how many months I just went to Shelter and I didn't dance, or actually once I tried, and I was like, I'm gonna kill. I was doing my breaking thing, and I was like, this feels crazy. I'm gonna go back, and that was me by myself. So yeah, it was a lot of taking in. What I hear a lot is we always talk about it. It's energy, freedom, exchange. It's all of a sudden you're in this world and it's about a dialogue that's going on between, sometimes it is two people dancing together or maybe more, but really it's what the DJ is creating with the people in the space, and it's really astoundingly spiritual, I think, right off the bat, if you're kind of open to that sort of thing. So for me, it was really necessary because breaking, I'm a B-girl for life, but it kind of was always really confrontational and aggressive, and I felt like I was developing in a way as a human being, as a woman, where I needed different shades of ways to communicate and express myself, and in the varied rhythms and sounds in house and in the diverse community, I was starting to find that, and so I felt like it was really a gift that I found the house community, and obviously that led me to my MAWU sisters and the good fortune of being in New York City and getting to learn from these pioneers of the dance in New York City. And because it is such a young culture, there's all these generations of people that were doing the dance before it was called house, before the music was called house, and then, the next generation Dance Fusion, Mop Top, that kind of, and I know we're going to get into this later, but this globalization and codification of the dance, so I feel fortunate that we're in this position to sort of receive all this information from all these different generations of dancers and be part of the scene in New York that's so vibrant. And like Linda, I feel there's that place that's really personal that I always need, no matter what's going on or what shows we're doing, or a million work things are happening. You just need that release in the club, and that's the local personal thing. It's you need your peoples and the music and the space that you're familiar with, and then alternately, there's the international thing, which can be really amazing, and you're oh, I'm going overseas, and I don't know these people, but we can communicate because we both do this dance. But it does feel a little removed from that kind of essence of your home, home house. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. So, yeah, that's all.
Okay, I'm Boogie McClarin. I'm 5th generation Chicago on one side, and it goes deeper than that because I don't know them, they're Powhatan. So as long as there's been land, I'm from Chicago, the land of the wild onion, the layers that unpeel, the layers that give flavor and sustain. When there's no food, you can find an onion. I'm from Chicago, I am indigenous house. There was never a time I was not around house. There was never a time when the radio stations weren't playing house in my life. There was never a babysitter that didn't have a mixtape. There was never a sock hop at a high school party that didn't have a house DJ. I'm indigenous house. In fact, it was a shock to me when I went to college that I found out that people didn't know what house was. What do you mean you don't know what house is? It's the music that you play when you want to dance. Yeah, when you want to battle and you want to prove something, we're going to put on that. But when you want to dance, you want to get to know people, you put on this. And we call it house. Only after 87, 88, when we started making the tracks that said house and had jack tracks. So before that, it was just the music you found in your house that you put on when you wanted to play and make up and do other things. And it was the music that teens played in dark basements when their parents weren't around so that they could do nice things. I'm indigenous house. But when I found out that there were people who this wasn't part of how they were, it blew my mind, because there still was this thing that it only took one song to play, and they're like, oh, that reminds me of the Moroccan dirge, that reminds me of the bomba y plena, that reminds me of the Cuban song, that reminds me of. I hear this lyric and it's talking about something that I have always felt. I need to belong. So all it took was one play. Now the next thing you know, everybody I know, we're all loving house. Just because I'm indigenous house, so you know, I like to share my food and you learn to love it. I'm so excited to be here, and I have been on a flight for a long time. So I am going to be 100% full out who I am, because that's what house taught me to be. Okay, I am multicultural, multiracial, and whatever, from a city that is known for killing Black Panthers. And that's in my blood. That's what I see. That's what I know when I look at a West Side that used to be vibrant, that used to have thriving Black businesses, that now is a desolate space where crack was put in to destroy whole families, and artists come and renovate, and next thing you know, hipsters move in, and bam, the people of color are gone. This is the city I know and have lived in, and have pictures of my great-great-great-great-grandmother looking at a trolley car and a street lamp at. So for me, the music is an extension of other parts of the music of the place. And it is a constant exploration of how we reconnect and remember each other and our human family, and the beauty and necessity of sonic vibration. It's what keeps us together and gives us release. I've not chosen to do anything more than be really, really rooted and committed to exploring this thing since I bought my first album in 1985. I guess I won't be auditioning as a 22-year-old. I've been committed to exposing people to this thing that kept me from taking that one more pill that would have killed me. I've been committed to exposing and exploring this music because it's that thing that made me put my hand down when I could have made that fist and put me in jail, and I wouldn't be here now. Because I know that everyone gets to that breaking point, and that sometimes words can't express, but music can. And dancing inside of that space does something else. So I went off to school, and that's when, again, I found out in 91. What? Nobody know? You guys don't know There But For The Grace of God? There go, I. You don't sing the chorus like that? Okay. But I found out that they had other songs that were their songs, their anthems. And then every once in a while, we would have a common anthem. So, you know, we have a shared, you mentioned CC Music Factory and CC Pennison. We know when we hear that, we're gonna be so happy, you know? And then even prior, I think earlier than that, there's this connection between artists like Robin S. and Shannon, TKA, and what was known as the freestyle music. So, you know, it gets called house now, but I think that really it is the contemporary dance music of meeting people. It's what I imagine would have happened if it was 1715 and we were all on Ellis Island and someone had one last little piece of a song from their homeland. And we didn't speak the same language, but we wanted to go somewhere together. So we started singing our songs together. And we found out that, you know, voice can only do so much in a short period of time. And we start singing these songs together, and then we make new songs. I have stayed in Chicago and taught at the Old Town School of Folk Music since 1999, a house dance class. Because again, when I went away and found out, wait, everybody doesn't listen to this music? That there is a specific set of dances and dance styles that we do in Chicago that were not what were being explored and expanded upon. And I think that that's just out of the necessity of New York being the vibrant international artist at the time. We didn't have internet. You couldn't Google everything. You had to go to New York to to take the quickest flight to get to Paris. It's not quick to get to Paris from Chicago. It is not quick to get to Japan from Chicago. It is quick to get to Japan and Paris from New York. So the DJs were all knowing each other. They were all knowing each other. They were sharing productions. But the dance that was Chicago, I wasn't seeing it. So I've stayed at home. I have stayed at home so that students who I have in other situations will know that there is a music that we have defined in Chicago. This music that is called house music comes from a long trajectory of protest and evolution song. So I've stayed home. I go out every once in a while. I've never really been interested in competing battles, judges, none of that, because my interest has been in trying to give someone one tool so that they might not take that pill that kills them, so that they will unclench their fist, so that they learn how to receive love. So I stay at home, because then you can find me. You can always find me. I've been at Old Town 15 years every Monday. You can find me. And if you want to know, I have known people. May they rest in peace. And I carry their stories in my heart, and I will never let them be forgotten. So there is Miss Bobby, who from 9 to 5 would do whatever she did. But I know that what she would did at 6 o'clock was go out and make her money doing beautiful shows to house presentations. Okay? So Miss Bobby showed me that gender presentation and how you exhibit and manifest as a woman doesn't have anything to do with what box you check on a census at any given point in time, nor does it have to do with whether someone identifies you as beautiful. I've had the benefit of traveling nationally, because once I got to college, I said, wait a second, you guys don't know what this is, but you know what hip hop is. But how come you cannot know what this is? They are the same thing. They are music that evolved through technology. They are a music that evolved a remixing of the danceable breaks with different idioms. What was then pushed in Chicago was the danceable part. The danceable part. We didn't have the battle mode. And I would conjecture, but I would take some beautiful brown academic to look into this. That has a lot to do with the high level of Chicago produced brutality. So we don't battle. You see, we are not gonna battle. You're not gonna find us putting no cardboard on the corner in Chicago. Okay, that was a very short-lived period. We went back to the basement.
Right.
And we played our house music. But once I, again, knew that this dance was specific, I knew I needed to know something about dance. I can't talk about language unless I know a language. So I had been put in dance because I was a troublemaker in high school, so they knew that I would cut class, and they put me in dance classes so I wouldn't cut class, because I would cut class till I got suspended, and so they said, well, you're gonna get suspended so you can go hang out on the Belmont Rocks. We're gonna put you in a gram class. And so I would be in 3 gram classes successively, holding pleadings, contractions, et cetera, because that was gonna get me in line. Okay, so I'm learning about dance technique and idioms again, so just so I can try to get to this place to explain why it is that when I am in Augie and CK's drag show Tuesday night, we feel a love that politicians dream about. I gotta figure out how I can get this out, because I was studying poli-sci. So I thought I was gonna dance music my way through the politics. Doesn't work. The politics gonna kill the dancing music. So I studied a lot of forms, and I had the brilliant opportunity to be at the beginning of when hip-hop as a dance movement became codified, institutionalized, and regimented. And I said, well, wait a second. I see how you're doing this. I better watch how you're doing this so I know how to do what I want to do. But in the process, I learned, again, okay, well, they're really the same thing. They're music that's remixed for the danceable parts using technology and all of the other things. And then it starts to have its nuance. So it's like, is it patois, is it Creole, or is it French? Can we understand each other? At the bottom. I get to study with Rennie Harris. I learn from Crazy Legs. I learn from Lil Lep. I hang out with Jules. I become known as the hip-hop dancer. But what everybody really knows is that I'm house to the core. That's why my class is labeled house, even when people don't know what I'm saying. They don't know what it means. They want to come and do the Running Man or whatever, to whatever their latest song is. But I am very astutely studying how this dance that I know is from people of the streets is being turned into an institutionalized dance form taught in studios, regulated by the same oppressive dance classes structures that told me that I couldn't be a ballerina because my booty was too big.
Okay.
So I'm trying to figure out how I can stop this from happening, because if it goes that way, it's not going to be the dance that stops the person from taking one more pill. It's going to be another dance to encourage someone to take another pill, because they're not good enough. They don't feel comfortable in their skin. They don't feel beautiful. They don't feel strong. They don't feel connected. Well, I know that you walk into that club and you're like, wow! And I've seen it time and time again. All ages, all colors, all races, all spaces. I put on the track and people don't even know what takes them. Next thing you know, they're loving this music and they want to dance. So nationally, I've been able to meet a lot of people, get some really good guidance and mentoring from Rennie Harris, Monsell, like I said, Lil Lep, and stay in good contact with them. To understand what does it mean to take a street form and begin to transmit it to people who are not from that space in a way that respects the cultural integrity, the pioneers, the history, and the trajectory that the movement was supposed to take. So hip-hop was supposed to be a revolution. It was supposed to get us to a place, well, it must have worked. We all sitting up here, we all in different colors, we all happy in here. We're at university, so maybe it's just at glacial time. But, you know, I wanted to be sure that this thing that was so sacred, particularly, you know, to people who we lost during the great AIDS plague of the 80s, was not gonna become just another way to oppress people. It had to be a way to connect us, any one of us. The one who wants to be the dancer, the one who just wants to dance with the dancer. And I've been very fortunate, very blessed, and very sacrificial. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I passed up graduate school opportunities. I left $40,000 and $50,000 jobs. I gave up driving. I did all kinds of things because I had to learn how to know everything there was to know about dance. For this form, that is a form based in the oppressed and exploited people, to be taken as valid as Chiqueri Ballet, I had to understand the movement. So I had to sacrifice everything. It was many years of ramen and broccoli. And nothing, airtarian. I'm an airtarian. Carbon today. You know, and I got to this place where we can all be here now. But I think that this almost is still just the beginning. This is just the birth.
So you can write my book. I've just decided that after that whole little thing, performance. I love it. You hit on all the points. And yeah, I appreciate the kind of trajectory of your thought process, because I think that, you know, as we go through the next couple of questions, we're going to come back to a lot of what you invoked, and it's really wonderful to sort of have New York and Chicago represented and just kind of decenter those centers. You know, how we're all decentering, we're always decentering the centers of where supposedly these forms emanate, you know, and emerge. I wanted to just take a moment and just reflect on some nuggets of what folks were saying. I think first of all, what really stands out in this conversation and what threads through all of what we've been saying is this idea of house dance and dancing to house.
Yes.
And the difference. And I think I really appreciate, I think it's also a sign of the generations that are represented here, that we can make that distinction. Because I think younger folks, in some ways, who come into the studio understanding house as a technique, maybe are not aware of that difference. But I came to house in the early 90s, and I had no idea there was a technique called house until I went to Rennie's first Illadelph Legends, and all of a sudden people, oh yeah, there's a technique.
With Monsell teaching that class,
Oh
that's
yeah,
why I went too.
I was like, where? Yeah, I was in Moncel's class, and I had no idea. I was like, oh, there's a technique. Oh my God, I got to study. Where's my pen and paper? Let me take notes. Because I didn't know. And so it's really interesting to think about that, and I'm glad that we sort of already got that discussion on the table. And I just wanted to also, thank you for invoking, Fred Hampton and others in your city, and the importance of that relationship. And that's something that I'm going to come back towards the end, especially in light of the current of where we are at in this current moment and the events that have kind of involved all of us in the last couple of weeks, particularly, but that only are sort of a long history of violence. And I really appreciate the eloquence with which you made those connections and how you see those connections happening in your practice. That was really beautiful to have that, come into the space. Because I think that, when you want to get to know people, you put on house. I'm quoting you. That's right. I'm not actually texting people here on my phone. I'm taking notes. So I appreciate, because I think that was also reflected in everyone's comments, this idea of the kind of core center of house being a social practice, not just an experience, yes, but a practice of relating with each other.
Can I just comment on something?
Yeah, of course.
Just about something that you were saying about the disconnect between the younger generation in relation to the older generation, like understanding that there is a shared energy between people. It's deeper than just, executing some sort of technique. Like we didn't even understand that what we were doing was a technique that was going to be refined and developed and taught out to the masses. It was just something that we did. It was our culture. It was our lifestyle. We lived this, and it was like if we didn't do it, you just didn't feel right. If I didn't go out for a while, I'd get depressed. I'd get sad. I really would. And so, there was a craving to share this energy with people. It was a social thing, and at the end of the day, it's about sharing and exchanging energy. And if I just feel like there's a bit of a disconnection of understanding that basic human thing, organic thing.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that now on the global street dance scene, some of the pioneers are actually beginning to teach social dance classes, because I think that there's a way that people began to see what was happening in the spread of these dance forms globally and seeing, the social element is being taken out, so let's teach social dance.
But that's, I have to say that, I would be remiss if I didn't take this form to say it. I think that's the problem with people jumping into things before they do their research. And that's the problem of anybody jumping into anything before they do their research. I couldn't be a neurosurgeon just because I saw it on Nova, and teaching my homeboy how to do a step that I like to do is very different from transmitting information about movement to a group of people who have an understanding probably far beyond the teacher of dance because of the level of privilege they have access to even be in there taking a class. So,
and just to remind folks, or remind myself, I like to say this, that dance was not a category available to Black people because, street dance, the term street dance comes from the fact that in the 70s, they were not allowed in the studio. This was literally a study of the movement of the streets. Street dancers were and still are students of the street, of the movement that comes out of the street, and I think it's really important to situate our dance forms in that kind of reflection, And so I really appreciate this kind of deconstructing of the studio and its place and its power and its privilege, and to remember that we can innovate our own terms as street dancers. I actually refer to us as practitioners more so than dancers, because to me the practice is even more what's important. And so I want to move on because I know we don't have endless time here, although we could probably talk all night.
Hint to sponsors, we will need another conference. All of us.
But Girl, I'll House You. That's the title of this panel. I love this title. It's so evocative. I wonder, it makes me wonder, what's the context in which those words are spoken? Who's speaking those words, and who are they speaking to? And can I just take a real quick moment to tell a story about the shelter?
Go.
Because you were talking about breakdancing, your breakdance moment in the shelter. And I had this experience in the shelter where, I was watching the cipher, because I like to just sit and watch too, kind of witness people's movement. And, so this boy jumped in, and it was like the big cipher that was happening right in front of the stage, and he was breaking real hard, like all into it, but it was like all the acrobatics, he was doing all the acrobatics and just really working it out. So this, I don't know, it seemed to me like a 7-foot-tall, 300-pound drag queen came walking in. Oh, you know this person? Not only drag queen as in all done up with makeup and the outfit and everything. Just fabulous in the way she was moving, owning the space.
Yes.
So, she walked into the middle of the circle, laid out on the floor. Just laid out on the floor. Just a diva Indian goddess, and just laid there. Literally, laid there. And it was just stopped all movement. And it was such a strong moment for me, about what this kind of, first of all, speaking to this meeting of different cultures and different ways of expressing yourself through movement, and what you were saying, Ephrat, was really, it reminded me of the importance of how these kind of cultures mix, and how we as women have kind of, as street dancers, have also found different ways to pick up styles to sort of expand our range of expression, and I think that there's something specific to be said in terms of house dance. Girl, I'll house you. Already we're getting this complexity of what gender might signify in house dance, in house culture, considering especially that it's been historically coded as Black and gay. And so I'd like to sort of reflect for a minute on, the idea of house dance in relationship to womanhood in specific, and to think about that kind of history.
Wait, can we back up a little bit? Because I'm not sure that the dance is framed as Black and gay. I think that often, in general, people think about house culture as queer culture, and by default, people of color's queer culture. But inside of the dance, I would say that it's mostly been heteronormative males who've been establishing the standard for dance in the mainstream.
When it became codified.
Yeah.
Very much.
I mean, can I just go there? I mean, we're here, right?
Do it.
Yeah, you're
Do
allowed.
it.
Okay, I'm not sure how many guys would have gotten overseas if they hadn't had a girlfriend getting them there.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
I'm just trying to say, and I'm saying that only because I think that it is important to talk about why we don't see more women in the scene. Maybe if I had a sponsor,
That was their
you know what I mean? And that's not to knock them, because sponsorship is good. Teamwork makes the dream work. But it is harder as a Black woman already defined as less beautiful, less intelligent, less valuable, less necessary, to find a sponsor. Because now I have to compete with every other non-Black woman doing my stuff in order to get the sponsor.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to say that I didn't want to, I think that it's important to go ahead and try to address any presumption that we could investigate. I mean, we're here. Let's explore.
Thank you. Okay, so the question on the table is, considering that dance into house emerged in underground spaces, where gender was a more fluid and free idea that was also tied to a specific history of race, has this underground history influenced how you identify and perform as a woman within house dance culture?
Absolutely. You want to start, Tara?
Sure.
And yeah, I think that also, I mean, you're totally welcome to start, but I also don't want it to feel like it has to be some kind of
Right,
like
right.
regular, you guys can just go ahead when you feel.
Well, I mean, all right. So, first of all,
It's too much.
yes. Again, like with like shelter, for example, or even hanging out with like, you know, people from the older generation, like with Brian, Sekou, Khalif. One, I've heard lots of stories about how a lot of them at first wouldn't go to house clubs because they didn't like that there was a lot of gay people there, so they only felt comfortable at the hip hop clubs. So I know that was somewhat of a barrier. But I also know that for me, I felt like in the house club, everything is kind of embraced. So I'm also a B-girl for life, like Ephrat. So I felt like within the house club, I could find my feminine side as well. Like, because sometimes being around B-boys all the time, like, in spite of yourself, you find yourself being like a man. So it was good to be in an environment where, at the same time, femininity or being a woman or womanliness or whatever, like goddess power, whatever, like that aspect of being was looked at as something powerful and great, not just like cause in, you know, like in hip hop and the breaking scene, like it's not always necessarily, it's more like disempowering, like, cause like within hip hop, there was a time when like women dancing was like very powerful and awesome, but then it turned into a lot of just booty shaking and twerking and, you know, which there's nothing wrong with like female sexuality, but it's kind of been, I don't know, I don't even want to get into that. But the point is, yeah, it was just good to be in an environment where I could develop my femininity and not feel like it was a bad thing, like where I could dance with like dudes who are like 50 and not feel like, oh, he's a creeper. It's like I could really feel like, oh, this is like just a pure exchange and like we're dancing together and it's like it's just a conversation and I'm kind of exploring myself in a safe space compared to where like in other kinds of genre music environments it was like more confrontational or yeah, like where I just felt like I needed to be more guarded with, you know, what I felt like expressing at the time. And so yeah, within the house scene I've been able to explore like breaking because it embraces everything. I can do African, I can do voguing, I can do whacking, I can just jump around and I can just shake it, you know, like, so I like that, yeah, I can be whatever balance of like masculine and feminine energy I'm feeling at the moment and not feel that there's any particular thing wrong with it. Like in certain circumstances I can feel more like, oh, like maybe I'm not feminine enough right now, or like maybe I'm too masculine at this place. But like, yeah, within house it's like the spectrum is so anyone can fall in anywhere, where to like, and in that environment it's helped me to develop like just being myself like fully compared to the other genres, which were like very masculine. Not that there's anything wrong with guys, I guess, but saying.
Well, wouldn't you say that that's maybe not the same for B-boys coming into the scene? Like, I feel like I've seen over time, B-boys come into the scene and they mock, imitate, or ape queer culture by halfway pseudo-voguing and picking up a house step or two so that they can go battle with it.
Well,
But they're not really exploring
Right.
the spectrum of how they could be. You know, I'm wondering if
no,
you see that.
nowadays-
Are you seeing it more?
No,
In New York City,
nowadays
it's
they're
different.
taking it more serious. Like
Okay.
at
It's
first
different
maybe
here.
they did joke about it,
Uh-huh.
but now like I find that a lot of B-boys, like from my generation, like in the 90s, like they're now becoming serious house dancers or giving more props to it because they tried it and they couldn't hang, like, because they're recognizing like the energy of breaking, they can't be like that all the time. They can't be angry and aggressive or confrontational all the time.
And they truly love
and they're
music, too.
recognizing like,
And-
you know.
Yeah, and I think it depends. Like in New York is a very particular case. Like
Yeah.
a crew that was very like influential to me, and I think was like a kind of like when some of the pioneers started going to travel, like dance fusion people. It was Step Fiends, this crew from Long Island that they were b-boys, but they were always at the house club, and so
Always.
and they're like house DJs. Some of them, like they're kind of an example of b-boys that I think Micah, this is one of the questions you sent, like when some of the hip hop clubs started shutting down and things got a little bit like too dangerous, people started going to the house clubs. They were a crew that was like hard bodying the love of
But,
house.
like, I didn't even know that a lot of them were b-boys.
Right. They were just
Because when they came to these clubs, they would house, and then they would add a few power in there, but
yeah.
weren't.
They were dancers. They came up with freestyle
They
music too.
came here to dance. They didn't go to like, I'm gonna show you house
Right.
dancers my. They came to exchange and
Right.
to like add. They came to add something.
We actually call them browsers because they would do breaking and housing, so we call them
No, but I
they do.
I think the thing is that they still came up with a culture like
Yeah.
readily that they were part of the culture. They were making the culture, and maybe you're talking about people who are so disconnected from the scene and that are b-boys that are like, oh well, that looks cool. That's like a cool little footwork step I can put on my top rock. So is that maybe what you're thinking?
that, but also, I mean, again, I keep it local. I'm local hospitality. I took a couple years off because I got a 7-year-old and he's most important. Sorry, y'all. But I'm local hospitality. So, whoever comes in for any gas, they come to Smart Bar, I'm running you.
Right.
Now what? And what do they come to do? To fake Vogue for a second, just so they can add it into their battle. Never respecting the queer culture that's existed around them.
Right.
And so this has been my question, and I hope that you guys can help me answer it. Why did they send Dance Fusion and not the queer dancers that were already in the club?
It's about who was in contact with who and who was funding with the workshop or whatever dance
who
studio.
was in like
and-
House of Trey? And
Yeah, that's
who
what
was
I'm
in
asking.
the
Like, I'm just
music
asking
parties
for
and
you
the
guys
music
to
videos.
throw those things out there because, again,
Can I
it's
just
being
make a little clarifying statement because I think maybe some folks may not know all these, groups and stuff. But and also feel free to alter what I'm saying. But Dance Fusion was a crew made up primarily of Sekou Gibson, Khalees Sellers, Marjorie, and who else was it? Tony McGregor.
Oh,
Huh? Shannon
Mabra.
Shannon
Mabra.
Yeah, Mabra.
Shan Selby.
Okay, and so this collective of folks really came in I want to say the early to mid 90s and began to codify the steps they were doing in the clubs to house music, and really they are the ones primarily who were able to begin traveling internationally and teaching this technique now known as house dance to folks internationally. I mean, initially I would say probably Japan and France were the biggest. And now it's to the extent that generations in those countries are now teaching, But so we're again talking about this distinction between dancing to house music, which you keep bringing us back to. Thank you for bookmarking that. That distinction and the way that certain communities get included and excluded in this codification. Who gets the privilege of codifying the style and why? Because of these kind of relations of power that are gendered, and I think that's such an important. I'm so glad to see this kind of being deconstructed here.
Well, I mean, there's a very specific reason I use the word indigenous for when I described myself. Because I think that this has to do with the power relationship that we see and identify clearly as wrong when we're talking about human trafficking or we're talking about, child labor or this. But when we're talking about modes of artistic production, particularly by women of color or people of color, it's never seen as colonizing or stealing or exploiting or alienating. It's seen as, oh, you know what? She just wasn't professional enough. She didn't call on time. Where was her business card? And that queer person, I don't know, they just made me feel uncomfortable sometimes, and they can't be around the kids making them feel uncomfortable. You know, and we have the space now where let's put it out there, because tomorrow's not promised for anybody. And I know that my friends and I have been discussing these things for at least 15 years. So I'm sure that you guys have.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yes.
And if this is the space to get it into the discourse, let's get it in there effectively.
Well, to even further add on to what you were saying, as far as like who dictates who, you know, who was the first to start, you know, spreading or, you know, sharing our culture and what we do. There was a lot of people before the people who are known on an international stage that are not known at all. There were a lot of people that laid the groundwork before these people. And the people in Mob Top and Dance Fusion, they all know these people and they pay homage to them. But there's still a disconnect that there's anything beforehand, you know? So I'm that's a sticky point with me, because like I know all these people, like, but I didn't know names when I started going out. I didn't know who these people were. It didn't matter to me who this person was, or Dance Fusion, or like any of that stuff did not matter to me. Like for me, it was about music and about DJs. So like dancers to me was like second, like it just didn't matter. So I was seeing people who were in their 50s, older, 30s, and just all ages, all, you know, sexualities, all genders, everyone expressing, communicating, sharing in the same space, on the same level, and on a similar tip. And it was beautiful and it was amazing, and the energy hits you like a ton of bricks when you walk in through the door. And it's life-changing. And I'm just going to circle back around to your question, which was for me, as a woman, initially coming into these clubs, my background was hip-hop. I loved hip-hop. Hip-hop is like in my core. I grew up with it. Soul, funk, hip-hop, and salsa. So, but growing up, you know, it's kind of, you're just a little hard, you're a little edgier, you're a little harder, you know, and I translated that into my house steps. And I went on this journey for a long time, finding my femininity, finding my softness, finding my ladyhood, and also like being okay with sharing that with someone and knowing that it wasn't like less. You understand? Like someone could be throwing out big power, but that big power may not be accenting this song necessarily, or just kind of like where I'm at, you know, and they may not necessarily be connecting with, you know, we may not be connecting. And somewhere along the line, I became okay with that, and okay with the fact that like I can be okay with like sharing who I am and not having to like let the next person dictate where this conversation is gonna go. I have power, and I'm a woman, and it's okay to lay down where this is gonna go. And you know, and if you don't want to like come along with me and share with me, that's okay, you know, because I'm here to have a good time. And you know, it's just there was a journey for me that was mine, and it took a long time to get there. But I feel like the gay community and these clubs were definitely a big factor. And also like when you're coming in, you don't necessarily understand if you don't have someone telling you ahead of time that, okay, this is whacking, okay, what they're doing is lofting, okay, now they're doing house steps, and oh, that was a b-boy freeze, or you know, I didn't understand all that, you know, like it was like a crash course. I just was doing purely organic, and along the way I learned myself, I found my family. So yeah, that's simple.
I just wanted to like reply to what you said earlier, because you made me think about ambassadors of, and like, so as a B girl, like I also studied a lot of, the history of breaking, because a lot of the pioneers of that technique live in New York. And, everyone's heard of Crazy Legs and Rocksteady Crew, but that's partially because they happen to be the crew that got to be in the movies. But there are millions of other B-boys and crews who are, way better, or, who smoked them and you'll never hear about them. So I feel like part of, why, Dance Fusion or Mop Tops got to be like the ambassadors for, a lot of the street dance in New York is because, they happen to be the ones in the videos or in the documentaries, or who are at the clubs where I could say, like, and I was talking about this earlier with Rhodesia, like, I remember when the wave of Japanese people came to New York, and I was like, who are these Japanese? They had like, I was like, are they dressing like us?
They had all.
What really intrigued me was like, they would get hair treatments to have our hair texture, and I was like,
because dreads were really big in the 90s.
Do you do that on purpose?
Everyone had dreads.
And like they would
in the bag.
and they would stare at us, or they would wear shoes that were way too big for them, so it would look like they had bigger feet. Like, they were serious. They were committed to
looking the part.
Yeah. So really, like being down stylistically, I don't know, and so they picked these people at the club, and they would really want to mimic their style. And to this day, like now, like internationally, I can watch someone dance and know who their favorite is. I'm like, oh, that's Kali. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's Egypt.
Absolutely.
Like easy, like, because, again, it's like, and this is like something I didn't talk about my initial, like when we're talking about personal and local and international, like, locally, like, I could bring someone to a club, or I can know, like, even when I teach a class or a workshop, I try to make people feel what it's like to be in a club and exchange and feel. But a lot of people, like, they just want to learn steps. They just want to enter battles. They just want to, get some fame, maybe win some money, get some girls or some boys or whatever. Like, and they don't have the heart. Like, they don't understand there's an intention. It's not just empty movement and a shell. It's like, this is like from people's hearts. Like, this is like something that spans generations. Like, for me, like, I'm not indigenous house like Chicago, but like, I'm like New York indigenous in the sense that my grandma used to go to clubs. My grandma was a swing dancer, and she was super ill at the Roomba, and she has pictures of herself at the club like this and in little outfits. Like, so like, I know, like, for me, it's been passed down, and like, my grandfather used to play the trumpet at the club, so I'm like, I understand what you're saying, like, where I feel like a certain deep connection to it, like, that in the beginning, like, I didn't really know what was going on. Like, I was just like, oh, this is just what we do. We do freestyle at the block party, and like, and then like to see people come in who want to learn it, or people who saw videos and they want to learn this stuff and meet these people and do it. Oh my gosh!
Like, even not knowing at first, you could feel that there was a difference.
Yeah, it's like, it's so, it's emptier, and it's like, you don't feel like people are really trying to connect with you. They're more trying to compete with you or prove themselves or belittle you.
Outdance you.
Yeah, it's not about love. Yeah.
So, but I, and this is weird for me saying it here, but I think that has to do with people seeking validation and power.
Definitely.
But even by us being here, we have established a power relationship and a validation by it being us and you, as opposed to us. And you also telling me, I heard this remix of Daft Punk, and it really made me brush my teeth with style, boo.
Like, that's for the Q&A.
But, the methods of validation affected house at the same time they were affecting hip-hop. But I think I feel them more deeply because of the people who I saw excluded. And I guess I almost want to say, I don't want you to think that I don't think you all could be indigenous, because to me, as soon as you eat, sleep, and breathe with love,
Right.
you become indigenous
Yeah,
house.
it's your life, your lifestyle.
You know, but it hurts me to know that so much of house dance has gone into b-boy culture, judging and battling and money prizes and all of this. And I know people who are no longer in my life who are queer, who were the most amazing, beautiful dancers I've ever seen. Just humans.
And no one will know about them.
No one. Or even really understand that, you
Their
know.
contribution.
Yeah, like that
Drives me
little step, you
crazy.
know how you were saying about like your vocabulary builds. I joked one day in class and said it's the Reiki of dance. But, you know, like, so who has to teach us? So, but, you know, how many of us are influenced even in how we move by someone that we don't know or we have a memory of? And I want to keep these people alive. There's ancestry in there. There is their story. You know, there is the story of my Puerto Rican girl who I know would probably be up here making me look real bad, but she went to jail. I did it.
Right.
You know, but we don't talk about how those oppressive structures change also how the art gets presented even inside of settings like this. And I've made many friends by always trying to bring them up and not let that be forgotten.
Absolutely.
That it's only because they are dead that I can be in Brown University talking. Because if they were alive, they'd be right here. I'd be sitting in the audience.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I recently saw this documentary called Rebel Kings talked about the birth of hip hop, how it came out of gang culture in the Bronx, and then there was like a big peace summit, and because there was peace, and basically like the gangs of the Bronx didn't become the savages that like the downtown like white media wanted them to be in this one particular event where like someone had been killed and there was a big retaliation that was supposed to happen. They basically made this peace, right? And all the gangs were like, all right, we're not gonna fight anymore. And that allowed the birth of hip hop to come to be. And it wasn't even hip hop, you know, back then it's people getting down to the breaks, whatever, park jam. I get really emotional when I think about that. The same way with house, that like the reason clubs like the Garage or the Loft or the Gallery in New York City came to be was because like it was not legal for gay people to dance together. Like there was a law against gay people, like people of the same gender, to dance together, and it was a lot of people of color. Like, and that is from that like struggle and that decision to find a way around it that all of this enormous culture that's now all over the world is, you know, yes, we're still talking about a lot of the same issues, but to me that is like an unbelievably powerful thought and like seed for all of this, from love, from just like the need to be together and to have a safe space to be, you know. So of course like it's really hurtful when those people that created it are not visible, you know, like in our memories, but like everywhere else people don't understand that. So
But it's also in their mentality. I grew up in a house where there was no better or worse. There were house rules. Come correct. What does that mean? Don't be nasty, mean, racist, classist, bigoted, smelly, or tacky. Come correct. Don't be smelly or tacky. You know?
Contribute to the energy.
Right, but there were rules, you know, and these rules are not being enforced because most of the culture has slipped into the commodified club culture. And I mean, I was 15, I wasn't going to nobody's clubs. It was my babysitter's tape that we were sneaking in the basement. So, you know, like even just limiting it now, how we have to, like we have to almost limit it to the clubs. That's the only space where we can dance. It changes what the thing is. It changes how we experience
No,
it.
I totally agree with what you're saying, because like we've had dialogues for a long time about like, why is the scene like this, or why are these people coming dancing all like this or feeling like this, and you know, like, and part of it is that I'm not going to mention any names specifically anymore, but like some of the people who went over to teach, they were very like, I'm the king and you are my, you know, servants, and you want to learn from me. Yes, you're my disciples, you know, like, so they kind of projected this kind of relationship that wasn't really like, maybe like, you know, like sharing, and but we're still equals. I'm just sharing something with you, but whereas you're beneath me and I'm going to treat you like in this certain way, or people saw it as like, this is my income, so I can't like, you know, I can't like, I have to make sure I'm very specific with the information I give so that, you know, no one
That's right.
takes like from my, you know, no one can
Gotta
compete
keep
with my
making that money.
product, you know, like, so I know like certain aspects, like elements like that did, you know, kind of taint things. But I do know that there were a couple of people, like I know like Brian Green, who's like my main mentor, and I know Ijo also, like they like, you know, really always tried to like name other people that like you'll probably never see, never heard of. Brian even like went out of his way to like bring other people like to House Dance Conference. Like Brian is one of the people who helped, you know, get everyone to know like Tyrone Proctor and Archie Burnett, you know, like he really works very hard to try to educate people. So I know some people like they do like take very personally making sure to like pay homage, but I do know like that, yeah, a lot of people were left out of the story, but I think it has to do with a lot of the original people flown overseas were kind of immature and masculine and, you know, not very business minded and not thinking, you know, fully about the ramifications of their behavior and their
10 years
Yeah,
later.
I'd actually like to move into the next question, because I think that what we've been discussing about this, about how the movement, the culture gets transmitted, I think that that's really relevant to this next question. And I'm kind of going to just include the last two questions together, not just for the sake of time, but I think that they go well together. And so, you know, we're here, as we keep talking about, because of this kind of development, and I mean, in a way, this kind of commercial spread, the spread of house dance into the studio, has then also opened the doors to house dance in the university. You know, like that kind of progression has happened to where now we're seeing house dance in the university and seeing it come into university classes, just beginning, you know. And, you know, I think that there's also something when we're talking about, okay, how do we teach? What do we teach? How do we create an experience that is so fundamental to a kind of underground space in a sort of more gendered space, or like a more divisive space in terms of like gender, sexuality, that kind of thing, in a space of power and privilege, which we might think about in terms of like the university dance studio. How might we recreate these ideas of coming together, of being together, of making a personal connection, of making a social connection? And I think that, you know, I'm going to just try to weave all these ideas together. But, you know, in this particular moment where we're dealing with a really fundamental violence that is foundational to our society, and that's foundational to what blackness is in the world. How do we make this connection, which I think we're already making as we speak, between what seems far-fetched, dancing to house music, and political death, really the political death of blackness. I think that we're already beginning to make this kind of connection. But what is this?
Oh, hold on. I need you to repeat that statement.
Okay, I'm talking about...
Not the whole thing. I just need to hear the last part, please, because just so you guys know, I studied political science and philosophy. I get real hot-headed when I hear certain things. And so if I get into hot-head mode, I'm sorry. I'm not angry. It's just how my passion was trained to manifest. I'll work on it for the next video. Okay, so what was the last part again? The death of blackness.
The political death. I'm making a distinction between the killing of black people and the inability to have a voice in the political life of our society, you know, and the way that kind of keeps being replicated in the kind of actions that we're seeing in the police system, right? We're looking at what happened in Ferguson, and we're looking at what happens with Eric Garner in New York, these very recent indictments. But I think it's not unconnected to the fact that, you know, Monday was World AIDS Day. And, you know, for, you know, a large segment of, I mean, there, in terms of AIDS and in terms of, like you were talking about, Boogie, the disappearance of queer folks, you know, that this is not unconnected to these other deaths, although certain deaths sometimes get more media play, right? Not to somehow devalue the importance of any particular kind of death, but to also bring these different ways that people disappear into, you know, the conversation here.
I thought it was really complicated. I wanted to get some clear, because the first thing that I would say is I don't see any of the actions happening as political death. I see them as political rebirth. We were never supposed to stop revolting, ever. When we did, that's when the problem started. So there has always been in political blackness, revolution, rebellion, and subversive activity. I don't see this as death. I'm like, yes, we came back to life, eyes open, mouth ready. Let's go.
So then my question to you is, if you see that as political rebirth and subversion, how do you, and my question is to the panel, how do you see that, how do you transfer these kind of ideas, this philosophy through the aesthetics of house dance?
Well, I think that those are two separate things, okay? One of the nicest things that I've heard in my beautiful conversations and like Angela Davis mixtapes is what kills a revolution first is no more party. You have to have in mobilization a space, a release valve. You've got to have decompression time. You've got to have ways of working together so that then you really learn how to work together. When the time comes and we got to build a wall, we already built 4 ciphers. Yo, we've built 4 ciphers for 5 nights. Let's build this wall. We know how to work together. They are not disconnected. Like for me, they're essentially, they're necessary for each other. But because we also don't have any reason to have a freaking party if we haven't been having any rebellion. Have you seen greenhouse effects on the environment? Like, not even just social justice issues, basic issues, lack of fresh water, death of tribal societies. Like, so we need to no longer have parties unless we're also rebelling and working for a world that's really embodying love. And we can't have rebellion if we don't make space to refuel the love. Like, my take on it. A statement on the World AIDS Day, though. I think that it's important for all of us in arts, and art criticism and art theory to know that we lost most of the cultural connoisseurs during that time. So since we lost the connoisseurs, we're all kind of working on a McDonald's taste for art. I mean, and I mean that about me. You know, like maybe not you guys. You guys can still be connoisseurs. You're very intelligent. But the everyday layman connoisseur was gone. So now our whole threshold for what culture should be has shrunk. We were just at a place where we were beginning to explore radical inclusiveness by Stonewall, and then we have AIDS. So that's why I think that house and hip hop got so competitive. We didn't have this like full spectrum inside of the scenes.
So I want to go a little bit more, really hone in on this question of aesthetics, because I'd like us to really make tangible material connections between the politics of what we're talking about and the aesthetics of what we're talking about. And so I'll just start from my own point of view and my own teaching practice.
Yes, do it.
In the university.
Yes.
I'm really interested in the way, because we've been talking about individuals being promoted and ambassadors and disciples and kings and all that, right? What is the potential of a collective practice? You know, what is the potential of the idea of improvisation, not just improvisation writ large, but improvisation within a radical tradition? You know, I think that, you know, the way that these styles get transmitted has so much to do with how we teach them and how we convey what's important and what we can learn from these styles. The styles very much speak for themselves. You know, we don't have to do the speaking sometimes when we allow the styles to speak. And I think that what's so special, you know, I call what I do cipher theory, because I want to first and foremost promote the idea of collectivity and improvisation, experimentation, you know, in the multiple ways that experimentation plays out.
Do you get paid in Bitcoin?
In Bitcoin or
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
Because to me,
Yeah.
there's really, we can't even discuss collectivity unless we're talking about collectivity of resources, dividends, and things that come after. See, because we're sitting up here right now. I'm not a professor at Brown, and you. You're an assistant professor, right? You're a
Not
PhD
yet.
candidate, but
Hopefully.
you will be, right? And what I'm saying is, so when we walk away from this conversation, unless we can imagine, and I believe that we can, I believe that we can envision a new way of modeling society, including scholarship and research. When we walk away from this conversation, we say, man, we learned a lot, boy. Keep in touch with me on Facebook. You walk away from this with footnotes, citations, quotes, people you can now interview next. You get funding to support that. You have somebody to help you. You know what I got? Micah, I can't get my ticket right now, boo, because I had to pay for my mama to move. So before we can talk about collectivity of intellectual resources, we need to talk about collectivity of tangible and intangible resources, up to and including recognition that these women's brilliance is an MA in dance. Why don't they get it?
Can I just also add, like, and I've also seen that, I mean, we've seen that on an international scale where people from other countries can come to New York, study for a little bit, go back home, get money, open a studio, come back to New York, open their own studio, like, so it's definitely about access to resources and,
But I know that we can't, because otherwise it wouldn't have been so hard for me to get here. We wouldn't be here after the Monday of World AIDS Day when all of these things are happening. If we were not all here witnessing this moment right now, it couldn't happen. But it can happen because it's out there and we're all here to think about it.
I think, just to kind of build on that, I think what's happening a lot more now is people are starting to come to the realization that this is something extremely valuable. You know, this is something that is extremely valuable. You know, it started from a grassroots, you know, local kind of a place, and it's evolved to something, you know, that is profitable, that can be exploited. And I think the realization that there is a lineage, that there is, you know, a sacred, you know, body of work, you know, movement that can be passed on, that there is a need for us to own our own studios, that there is a need for us to know our history, there is a need for us to work together to preserve, you know, speaking from, you know, our perspective being in New York, to preserve that nightlife that made New York so special. You know, just coming to that realization, I think, is enabling, or in a way, leveling the playing field, or giving room for the playing field to be leveled in a way that everyone's value is seen. You know, so there's less of, you know, we have a generation of dancers who, you know, outsiders look to as the, you know, the be all end all, and that's the only resource that is available, versus, no, there's a collective group of people who have been, you know, who have experienced, you know, this culture, who have access to this information, and there's not just one person that you can go to, there's several people. And, you know, I think that realization is what will help, you know, you know, disseminate a more rounded view of, you know, what it is that we do here. And the more people that realize that there is a need for give lectures, to to write, to document, to produce documentaries. I think the inclusion of or empowering other people to see that their voice is equally important in this story, and not just one voice or one group of people, not just their voices. I think that is what will allow us to get to a place where we respect not just one story, but we respect everyone's story. Even the outsider who's coming in. I once was an outsider. I once didn't know anything. I didn't know what a cipher was. I didn't know how to respect a cipher. So at some point we have to give opportunities for outsiders to understand, to get to the point where they do respect what it is that we do. We all have our own unique story. We all have our own input, and so the more awareness we can generate, I think the more we will be able to penetrate those systems. Where we're bringing this art form to the academic level, at universities and institutions like this.
I feel like the more people have come to New York City, what makes all I can do is speak on is New York, because that's the community I'm a part of. So I feel like the more people have come to New York City and have involved themselves in this community, they have been able to see for themselves, like just what it is. Oh, Jeff isn't the only one who teaches hustle, and this person isn't the only one, which a lot of people think. I mean, I've had people say that to me, like, oh, I was out, hustling on Coney Island this weekend. They're like, oh, with Jeff, and I'm like, no, and that's where their mind is at, because they don't know any different. They don't understand that these people who have gone overseas and have taught, they're cut from the same cloth as from that one person, there's 100 other people behind them who have laid down the groundwork for these people to have been elevated, and these people who have gone and taught and who have been fortunate enough and blessed enough to have spread our culture, they have somehow formulated their philosophy in teaching, and they have been blessed to do this. Has it always been perfect? No. Has it always been what we, wanted them to share? Not necessarily, but, through time, things have been changing, and a lot of people have been coming to the root, which is, New York City, and finding and learning on their own. And I think the more and more people who do that, they are actually, just being proactive and saying, hey, I'm not satisfied with this one workshop that I'm getting twice a year. I'm going to go and be proactive, and I'm going to learn and on my own, and I'm going to develop, because I love this culture. I want to live this life. I decided somewhere along the line that I wanted to live this life, and I think we all have. And along that path, the community grows, because now we're contributing to it as well. And we are growing with the community, and now we can sit here and tell our stories, because I put in myself 18 years, So it just shows that, when you make your life that, it will be that, and now you are a part of it. Now, as far as going on, as far as the political thing you're saying, as far as the city, I don't live in New York City. I live in Connecticut. I've always been a commuter. But what I can tell you, I don't know the politics that deeply in New York City, but there has been a humongous shift in New York City as far as, from one governor to the other, and how things have changed with the club nightlife culture there. A lot of things have changed. And it has affected us. And it does matter what's happening in that city, and it does matter what's happening on a government level, and it does matter what's happening on a social level, because it affects us, and it does trickle down slowly. The club culture is slowly diminishing. I hate to use the word, even though I use it, I say dying but it's just diminishing, and it's people like us that are trying to do everything that we can to keep it alive. But it does factor in to our community, and it has changed things a lot. And it's been hard. It feels like it's going more towards classes and workshops and battles, and it's going like there really isn't any clubs anymore like how they were before. I don't know why. Like, I mean, I feel like I have theories, but we can be here forever talking about that. But it has changed our culture. It has changed our community, and not necessarily for the good.
I had one thought again about the collective, because I've had some real made from TV movie experiences in my teaching. And here's my answer. Have we dealt with how we deal with plagiarism in the digital era?
No.
Do we know how to deal with plagiarism in the digital era yet? If we don't, then no, there will never be a collective. What will happen is all of the bottom will give to the top. There won't be a collective because we haven't changed any of the other structures inside of society to shape how that body of knowledge is then transmitted. So I like to think that Micah and I have worked and are constantly reshaping and revising what does this look like, what could it be, and like really imagine what could it be with infinite possibility. And I mean with infinite possibility. I want to be able to say, you know what, I can't give you a master's. You know what I'm going to give you? A mistress of indigenicity. You are now all MIs of house from me. I gave them to you.
Okay.
Okay? But you and you and you're going to have to take a course. Like, we have to start envisioning ways to deal with what we want to do with this aesthetic and how we deal with knowledge and exchanges of knowledge now that we are no longer in a space where the transmission of knowledge is limited to localized access. You know? So we'll do a workshop and one person will look, they'll film your video.
Okay.
They'll lose it, and then they'll tell you every word about everything you ever taught. We have not dealt with plagiarism, so I don't think we can have collective anything yet, unless people really deal with their stuff. You know?
And what's so ironic though is that like both hip hop and house, right? It's like freedom of expression. Like even hip hop, as hard as it is, you never wanted to be a biter. You never wanted to like have someone else's move. If you took someone else's move, then you changed it enough so they have no idea, and then you put your own flavor on it. Same thing with house. Like it's a freedom of expression, so it's kind of counterintuitive that you look like somebody else, because then you're not being true to yourself, right? But when on a local level, that makes sense, because you go to the club and you bug out and you're like, oh my God, my life, got my life. But yeah, now when it's out of that context, it's not about that expression anymore. It's about achieving this goal, whether it's battling or performing, or so yeah. There's that disconnect, and that disconnect creates these ills, right? And that now,
that's exactly what I'm talking about when I'm saying that, you know, for me, my practice is to look to the style to be the teacher, because right there you just gave an example of how hip hop dance theorizes. And if we look to what the theory is of the dance, there is something that tells us what it means to plagiarize versus what it means to innovate,
right?
To take and to elevate too.
No, what I'm saying is, last I read, universities across the globe cannot handle the level of plagiarism and intellectual theft that they are faced with in a digital era. I'm not talking about biting moves or plagiarizing with the theorizing of the movement. I'm talking about the preservation, enhancement, and protection of intellectual property in a way that reflects our love. I want to give everything I ever knew about anything to anybody. Let me give it to you. But if I give it to you and then you jack up my rent, why did I give you my most precious thing and you don't respect my basic necessities of life, or the fact that I had to do anything to get to a point to share to you? I had to brush my teeth, it means I had to brush toothpaste. I had to have water that ran. I had to have a home that had a bathroom. All of these things had to happen. And people presume that the artist just makes it happen. and then takes their cultural product.
Well, but look at our biggest pop icon, like Beyonce is like the queen thief herself. You know, there's like no examples that are leading the way. Like she plagiarized that whole Anna Teresa de Keersmacher modern dance piece in her video, and there was like no accountability at all. So there's no, do you know, like
in that system, but that's where I'm challenging us to envision a new system.
And
Like
so,
we
yeah,
can
and
make a system.
I mean, I know that I don't know what the kind of time is on this, but so I'm just gonna, and then we can.
Let's open it up.
I'll open it up after I just say that I think that you're talking about structures that exist in place, and your ability to imagine beyond those structures is, I believe, what you're really speaking to, and that also raises a question of ethics. Because I think there's a way that we can work within the structures that are already provided for us, and there's a way that we begin to think more about our actions and the ethical effects of our actions. And I just want to say that I think that the potential that bringing these dance forms, street dance, that is by definition anti-institutional because it never belonged to the institution. You know, there's a way that bringing these into this institution isn't about an acceptance. It's not about, oh, now we're being represented.
Right.
It's not about now we're being included, but how do we actually disinform rather than inform, like not the knowledge project being a project of information, but the knowledge project being a project of disformation. How do we disform these structures that we're in order to imagine a completely new way, not just of being able to gain access and being able to gain recognition and to be able to gain economic power, which is important, you know, but to also be able to gain a different way of relating to each other, you know, which I think in some ways really challenges what academia has always been about, you know. And so with that, I think that we should go ahead and we'll open it up a little bit. I don't know what our time is like, so.
I would say like we probably have about 20 minutes before we should wrap up, but I would love if people in the audience who have been such gracious guests and ask questions that are interesting to them.
I'll go.
Yeah, Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I work at the intersection of digital media, art, like cultural practice, education, and I like listening to your conversation, like, and from all of the things that have been going on, like in the last couple of weeks. The thing that I've been thinking about, and like what I want to hear from you, is when you're talking about these like alternative systems, yet everyone is still confined to like economic means. Like, how do you see? I mean, I could keep talking about that, but like, what I really want to know is like, how do you see your practice as political or cultural activism? Like, how do you see it, or like, how can you make that possible? Like, as you're talking about like another system that's possible, and that's like in the problem, because even within like your art and your art structures, like you're still crashing up against like capitalism, and you're crashing up against this idea of like hoarding of resources, and not necessarily like you're just trying to live, like you're not trying to get rich, you're just trying to live and share. But like, how do we make that, is that possible within the system, or like how does your practice, how does your art facilitate that kind of cultural activism?
Well, I try to make everyone examine very closely their privilege set in my class from the very first moment they walk in, including myself. Every single time, every 8 weeks, we all have to look in the mirror again and examine who we are and what we're about. What are our paradigms that we live with, and what are the things we're going to discard because they no longer serve us? For the people who come into my spaces and would like to leverage their skills and privilege with what I'm going to share, I'm going to make them feel the most uncomfortable, horrible situation they ever felt in their whole life. They're going to feel uglier, raggedier, most terrible thing ever. Why? Because from that space, they'll know what I'm talking about why I needed to dance. Coming from a space where they're still like, well, I'm still pretty privileged, you know, like I'm still okay. My life's okay. Everything about me is okay. All okay. You're not going to understand why I needed to be in the club at 7:30 in the morning. You won't get it. You won't understand it. So we have to take things, and very often they're just real simple physical things. Pointing out the obvious that everyone's always seen in this person, but they don't. You know, every time you dance, you stick your chin out, makes you look like a duck. I'm not saying that to be mean. I like animals. But is that how you want to look? Nobody ever told you that? Now you don't want to correct it? You're going to keep doing it? Guess what? The next move that you do that requires you to bend down lower, you're going to fall over because you just distended to the point where gravity blew you. You still don't believe me. You think I was just being mean. So you see, there are actual pedagogical practices you can put into place to disrupt the system. There are ways that you can shape the space in terms of what is safe and what is not safe, and invert the entire structure so that the person who has for most of their life felt relatively like it's about those people over there suddenly is like, oh, it's all about me. And then we get to dance from a pure place because we understand each other a little bit.
There's power in that. I mean, and it's that simple. It's power in people collectively coming together and collectively sharing energy and whatever. Like, most of it initially started from bad situations. From some of the most horrible things I can think of came the most beautiful things, you know? And there was power in all these people collectively coming together to unify, to express themselves, and whether it be release or just power in numbers, you know? So.
And I'm sorry, to your point about capitalism, what's often funny is that those who have the most material wealth or are at the top of the capitalist strata come into spaces with me and realize that they are dirt poor because they don't have the love I got. And they want to know how to get what I got. That changes their notion of capitalism right there. Because they realize that there's no amount of money that can buy my radical freedom. You can't buy this, baby. You have to earn it. You have to earn it through all kind of misery and triumph and time. So you can't microwave it either. And that also changes the notion of if there's a problem, throw money at it. Because you could throw money at my class all day. You're not going to get it till you put in the time. You're not going to understand the message in the music till you put in the time. And you're not going to understand your own body till you put in the time. So it's possible. It's not easy. I get asked often, aren't you worried about your classes not running? Do I worry? I used to. And then I said, you know what, if I stepped out on faith, why am I going to step out of faith? I have to stay in faith, that I know that I'm not doing this out of malice or to make people feel bad or to make money or to do anything more than like, man, I wish we were all hugging and giggling on the beach right now. That would be fun, eating our favorite foods. That's how I want us all to feel together. But I also am very keenly aware of the judgmental nature with which most of us are raised with that stop us from doing that, and the different material and immaterial things we use to create those judgment structures. So through movement, through visceral awareness, through the undeniable push of my elbow against your rib, you will know that now it's time to change things up.
And I just wanted to add also, I feel that it's really a revolutionary act to teach people or to empower people to be themselves. A lot of times people just want to follow or be conditioned or be like drones. So environments like in the house community where one, like you can be embraced as who you are, puts you in a position where, all right, I can start taking off masks, or I can start discovering, actually, I kind of like this thing, or I like actually to wear this kind of thing, or have my hair like this, or I don't know why I was doing that. I guess that's because my dad made me feel pressured to be like that from when I was a kid. So I feel like it's, yeah, like super revolutionary to teach people to really be individuals, because a lot of people are too scared.
Yeah, and the more true individuals we have, the more they'll speak their truth, which hopefully will be in line with wanting to have a collective society where everyone is able to share. I think for me, and I know students sometimes have problems with this when I say this, but I'm like, guys, I'm really happy you came. Like, thanks for coming to class. Please come back. But you're not going to learn, like, I'm going to share all my knowledge with you, but you're not going to learn the dance unless you, like, learn yourself. Like, you have to spend, I say that too, like, spend time with yourself. Like, go out to the club. And it's so interesting because inevitably, no matter what, exercise that I'm doing to try to get them kind of comfortable in their own skin, they always do the best when they're dancing with someone else. If I have them, like, just, like, opposite another person. Oh, because now they're not thinking so much about the step, they're connecting to another human being, which, yeah, in a way is revolutionary if you're somebody who's like kind of been kept in a box or is like oblivious of like other kinds of people who live other kinds of life, you know what I mean?
In the digital age.
Yeah, so yeah, there's something really powerful in that. And I think it's a really great question because it is really, it's like, it takes a real deliberate intention to kind of bring the aesthetic or this conversation into the political arena. I think it's really easy, especially when you get into the scene of like battling and performances, and it's like a whole world, but like it's so about the people and it's from the people, so we have to keep it connected. And so I really appreciate that question.
And I think that what we're really battling here, I know for me teaching dance always, is this thing of like, why do you gotta ruin it with politics? This is dance. It's about having fun, especially when it's hip hop dance, house dance. Well, this is celebration. This is joy. Why are you trying to take my joy? You know. So I think that also has to be.
But like, why did you're like, why did that joy? Why did that release have to happen? You know what I mean? It's like you have to. I remember when I like had this conversation with my class, and they were so mad because they wanted to just move, you know. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. Like that, we can't always just like do the movement, even though of course like.
And I think really that Boogie, you spoke really well to how that elbow in the rib is that comment without the words.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way of making it political, right?
I mean, honestly, I'm so happy that we've had this moment, all of us together, because these are ideas that I don't think get really spoken about, and having multiple voices, it becomes like a bigger wave in a body of water. And I guess what I'm really struck by at this really strong moment, and I'm sorry I can't really say it as clearly as I would want. You guys will refine it. Edit me in the notes. Is that we are all struggling to deal with people who don't want to live their life outside of their body. They want to be with their body. They want to be with their body. And we teach them dance, and they want to be with their body, but their body is living in a world and a creation, jobs, relationships, that is completely disharmonious, arrhythmic, nothing that would contribute to dance. And so when we're teaching them dance, we're giving them little ways that they're also going to be able to start changing their lives. You know,
I was trying to touch on that, but I didn't know how to find the words, so I didn't say anything. But like you touched on it. Yeah, I think that a lot of people live their lives and they wake up, go to work, go to class, do what their parents told them to do, and their grandparents told them to do, and then they're gonna tell their kids do the same thing. And then a lot of people don't they don't live their life in like joy or like, learning how to connect with people or just feeling their way through life, period. Feeling their way through situations, feeling their way through connecting with people or through movement, or just like the most natural, organic things that we were all given and blessed with as human beings on this earth, and we're not listening to them. It's a very organic, natural thing, and we all are blessed to have it, but we're not all listening to it. And most people aren't, and that's the sad part. And I just am really thankful that you brought that up because like I said, I was trying to like bring this topic up, but did not know how. And you were saying you were having an issue.
You just must whisper in my ear, that's all.
Right. But it's definitely something that I still struggle with. I'm, getting older, and I have all these questions, and people want to know why I'm still doing this, and when you're going to take life seriously, and blah, 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 even though I have a career and a job, and when are you going to, it's just kind of like, I don't have a timer on my life, and I don't have this whole set agenda of how things, like, this is what I love, this is what I'm passionate about, and I'm following that, and I'm actually feeling my way day by day through my life, and I'm fine, I'm okay with that. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's beautiful to like connect with people on many different levels, whether it be through music or movement or whatever it may be. I don't think that like we should tell each other how to live our lives. Like, who am I to say this is how you're supposed to live your life? Why can't we all be happy? Why can't we like express on a certain level, some metaphysical or emotional level that, that it's really hard to like even explain it, like feeling the wind, you know. It's I don't know.
Well, just to add, like also, like yeah, the environment in a lot of ways is very disharmonious and full of a lot of contradictions and things that are kind of crazy. And I think as a result of that, a lot of people are looking for security. So even like as a mirror in like the house dance scene that, you know, I see in New York, like people will like to see, well, that dancer is popular, and so I would like to look like that person instead of, you know, taking the style from inside of my own self and seeing how that looks in front of everybody. You know, like that's how people operate through daily life. Like they're insecure because the environment looks crazy, so, you know, they rather hide on social media, you know, or, you know, do what everyone else is doing, or go with the flow and not make noise, like, you know, and keep their head down instead of like really doing the work of discovering who they are and, you know, recognizing like, actually I didn't agree with that, but I was just too scared to stand up for myself. Like, recognize that, you know, you betrayed yourself, and now when you carry that around with you, there's a part of you that is miserable, you know, like that's what I mean, like recognizing like that you will find inner peace when you learn to listen to your own heart instead of clinging to things outside of you for validation and acceptance, or feeling like you sort of belong or whatever. So yeah, just to add like to what you were saying, I definitely see that. Micah, what you like to say?
Yeah, no, I was pretty much going to say what Tara just said, that you know, I think truly knowing yourself is one of the scariest things that, you know, someone can do. And to be able to teach someone how to overcome that is giving them a very powerful tool in life. You know, that discomfort that you were talking about, I mean, I think that's one of the most, you know, telling sort of obstacles, you know, that you can face, is when you're in an uncomfortable situation. What do? You know, when you're in a room full of people that you don't know, you know, how do you act? When you feel, you know, uncoordinated and uncomfortable in your own skin, how do you dance to music that you love? No one should ever feel like they cannot, you know, be who they are, or they can't be comfortable in their own skin. And I think, you know, folks who've had to deal with, you know, discrimination, folks who've had to deal with, you know, being attacked for being comfortable in their own skin, you know, I think that that's something that we can try to overcome, or that, you know, we can try to help bring some understanding, you know, by using tools like dance, to show people, you know, that there's power. You know, there's power in knowing who you are. There's power in, you know, being able to express yourself without fear. You know, without fear of judgment, without fear of retaliation. You know, there's power in that. And to me, that's what makes, you know, what we do so valuable. You know, it's not something that you can just appropriate and, you know, take on a surface level. Every time we teach, you know, it should be so much more than just teaching movements. You know, it is teaching, you know, how to be true to who you are, how to live your life, you know, without fear. You know, definitely see the connection with, what we do and empowering, showing people how you can be empowered through your art, which is through yourself, knowing yourself, and being able to use that voice, when it comes to addressing issues of social injustice. It really has a lot to do with knowing yourself and finding safety and security in that.
Yeah, and I just want to add that Marge, I think I can speak for all of us, she's someone that just is all about that, like being yourself, like be your own special creation, fight for what you believe in. And so I think like so many of us who kind of came up under her are just so grateful for that message, because that's, she's like such a strong, powerful female force in the scene. And so yeah, she's like kind of the archetype for someone who is like that example. And you're like, yeah, okay, I get that,
For the record, this is information that is co-owned by Boogie McClarin, the ladies of MAWU, Naomi, Bragin, and all of the wonderful people who gave witness to our ideas. All copyright will be protected. Right, camera? Okay.
So maybe on that note, we do have some set design stuff that needs to take place in here tonight for the workshops. Can we just please thank this amazing panel? I know it feels like it's move the furniture, right? Let's get the dance party started. But we will have a dance party all weekend long. So thanks again for everybody who came out today. I hope you guys will come to our workshops tomorrow night for beginning movers, Saturday at 12 p.m. for advanced movers, and for some of the street dancers in Providence, there's a workshop here tomorrow at noon. Y'all know who you are. So thanks everybody coming out today. I hope that these conversations continue all weekend.